I think dream come true, like Freddie said, to lead the Hawaii Ironman for so long. I just had one of those dream days. I was on swim, bike and run, everything was clicking really well, and unfortunately the wheels just fell off a little bit going down into the energy lab, and Freddie was coming at me pretty hard there, and I got out of the energy lab and I came across Crowe, and he said, you're going to have to suffer, to hold your second place, and that's what I just kept telling myself all the way back to the finishing line. You got to suffer, and I dug deep, and full credit to Freddie. He had an amazing race. He was so strong on that back end of the marathon, and Sebi on the bike, and I think Andrew Starkowitz. That was incredible what he did early on the bike. It was very gutsy of him too to take off like that, and he set the tone for the day. He made everyone ride the bike hard, and I think you can't have a weakness on the bike here if you want to do well anymore, and that's showing. All these guys rode really strong today and backed it up with a strong marathon. And I've always known that I've had that ability to run. I think I've just maybe haven't been prepared enough on the bike to the extent that I have been this year that made me fresh enough to run like I did today. And I think I think it helps leading the race too. Like you've got so much to lose, so you're running scared from these guys, and then you just go to that next level. And I think like I said, when Crowe said you're going to have to want to hurt, I think that was a totally new level for me. Traditionally here I've really suffered on that return leg from the energy lab and sort of come away disappointed with it. But today I was quite happy to hold strong, and I think I think it was more of a mental thing than anything. Yeah, like what Freddie was saying about Luke, obviously I've had a mentor in Crowe, and like I can't thank the guy enough for everything he's done for my career. We lived together in San Diego in 2003 on blow-up mattresses, and we've come, the guy ended up winning this race 3 times, and like Freddie was saying, you trust in a guy that has that, the knowledge, and we've always gotten out here a few weeks before, and I've trained with Crowe on the course, and I think this year we pulled up after a brick session a couple of weeks ago where he said, mate, you can really have a good crack at winning this race, and I took a lot of confidence out of that. And the plan, obviously, I honestly didn't have any plan to go on the Andrew Starkowitz suicide mission, but I was feeling good, and you've got to, like Roshi was saying, you've got to commit to a move here. I think in the past, if you get caught in that no man's land where you don't fully commit, and then you just leave yourself vulnerable to guys like Pete Jacobs or Crowe that are going to run you down every day of the week. So I think I just fully committed to the move, and it paid off.
I had a good swim. I think there was a massive front pack in the women, but it felt pretty comfortable, and it just meant there was a big group of us on the bike, and heading out towards Harvey, we kind of had a bit of a tailwind, and it's always hard to try and break away when everyone's getting a bit of a push, and so I kind of tried to stay patient, and then coming down from Harvey, I kind of thought I want to kind of break this up, and I put an attack in, and I got a bit of a gap, and then but everyone caught back up with me, so I thought, okay, I'll rest up and I'll have another go at Kauai, and that one worked a bit better, and I think it was me, Meredith, and Jody, and then it took a little while for my legs to come to me on the bike, but on the way back I felt pretty strong, and in the last 10 miles, usually I'm kind of hanging, but I was feeling okay, so I thought maybe I've got something left for the run, and then I felt average for the first part of the run, and maybe that's because I could see my gap to really coming down very, very quickly, and I thought I wasn't hanging about, but by the time I reached the top of Palani, it was already down to 2 minutes, and so then the big hub of media were around me, and I was like, okay, this is where the pass is going to happen, and really was just running like a different speed. But then I kind of got a second wind, and I kind of managed to hold the gap, and then the gap came down a little bit, but then I then it got bigger again. So, but I'm delighted with second place. You know, I couldn't have done anything else because I found the first part of the run really tough, and you know, it's almost overwhelming and I'm not complaining because the cheering is just incredible, and it's almost nice to have that quiet time for me just to kind of think about the race, and then it's something to look forward to. So I was then looking forward to kind of mile 22 when I knew there would be people there to cheer as well. So, you know, I didn't have my eye on the clock. You know, I think when you get on the marathon, you always just want to get to that finish line as quickly as possible, and you know, it's a race in the end, so it's the position, and we did have great conditions today as well. I think that was one of the coolest runs that we've had for a while, so you know, I'll take good circumstances, but yeah, I'm really happy with the time too.